The US-China trade war isn't the market's only headache anymore. Now bank stocks are tanking after reports of bad loans and growing fraud concerns. The government shutdown is also now expected to last 40 days. Tomorrow will be crazy.
Today was rough. We can see that the SPY tried to run up this morning, but ultimately rejected right back down as the news with the regional banks started hitting the market. And bank stocks are no stranger to pullbacks. We can see if we go to March of 2023 and we look at the banking crisis from 2023, KRE, which is a regional banking ETF, pulled back 46%. And with all the news hitting regional banks right now, there could be some opportunities with KRE. But whenever regional bank stocks fall, it often hits the whole market because these lenders sit closest to the economy, and it also signals that something might be wrong with the financial system's foundation. So I feel that this is going to be a situation that could develop over the next few trading days, and we could start to see more volatility out of these two bank stocks. The first one, Zion, ticker symbol ZION, got hit very hard today. We can see how much it actually pulled down, and if we actually go and we look at WAL, which is Western Alliance, they had a pretty big pullback as well. So we're seeing some pretty big drops here out of these bank stocks, Mike. And whenever you see these stocks dropping like over 10%, there's definitely a cause for concern there.
Definitely, especially like when we look at Wall, basically they alleged fraud by one of its borrowers for failing to provide adequate collateral. And then with Zion, they suffered a $50 million charge-off tied to a loan from California Bank and Trust. So we definitely are seeing some worrying signs in this area of the market. But even if we look at the largest bank in the United States, JP Morgan, they recently took a $170 million loss from one of their borrowers that sparked warnings from their CEO, Jamie Dimon, where he basically said, when you see one cockroach, there are probably more. So I guess it goes to show that there are growing concerns in America's financial industry, which of course has problems to it, and of course played a big part in today's drop. But as we know, the US-China trade tensions didn't get any better either. Trump recently confirmed that we are actually in a trade war with China, which, again, is not a good sign. And then China accused the US of deliberately causing panic over their rare earth controls. They said that they're still open to talks, but basically both sides are still pointing their finger at the other. So the U.S. is still set to impose an additional 100% tariff on Chinese goods starting November 1st. And, China's still holding firm on their rare earth export controls.
Like I said the other day, it's like both countries are saying that the ball is in their opponent's court. They're both waiting for one side to cave, and right now this is definitely playing an impact on the overall market, and I think that we can see that especially if we go to SPY from the past few trading days. Of course, we can go back to last Friday where tension started to really pick up, and we saw the market truly sell off. But this week, I would say the SPY has been pretty rough, Mike. I know that it has technically upticked a little bit this week, but as we can tell, things have been very choppy within this range following Friday's lows. Now today, we did start to see the SPY pull back in a pretty crazy way. And if we look over the past few trading days, SPY has actually been forming higher lows off of that Friday low. Today, though, unfortunately, it actually broke through that trend line and confirmed back to the downside right off of it in the middle of the day. So I'm going to be watching that area around 665 as critical resistance for tomorrow. If the SPY ends up breaking back above that, I will be watching for 668 to 670. But ultimately, I'm a bit worried now that we started to see that trend break to the downside and that trend of higher lows is giving out. I'm a bit worried that we're going to start testing some of these next lower supports. I think that looking at Tuesday's low of the day around that 653 to 654 range is going to be the most critical range to the downside. If the SPY could test that tomorrow, that would make for a great drop down to that bottom. But again, if we start to flush through there, then the sell-off could get even more brutal as we start to test Friday's lows once again here. So, of course, we're about 1 week from that Friday sell-off, and the market's done nothing but really consolidate over like the past 4 to 5 trading days. So, it's good to see volatility picking up again, though, like today. I would say it provided a lot of good opportunities, Mike, and you don't always have to just stick with the SPY. You can look at other ways to play the market like UVXY as well, which was up 15%.
Definitely. And that is basically showing that, the smart money out there is expecting the market to be more volatile than they previously were expecting. When we go back to the Liberation Day tariff crash of March and April of this year, and even a little bit of February, we can see that just volatility just exploded higher. And when we look at UVXY, that thing went from like $20 all the way up to above 50. Right now it's sitting right around, you could say, like $14 or so, and it is moving to the upside pretty quickly. But one thing I will say related to your SPY comments is, when we look back at Friday's crash, basically exactly a week ago, we can see it went from $673 all the way down to $646. That is a massive drop, and it was still less than a 3% pullback, which, certainly is big, but like in a historical sense, that's not even as crazy as, some of the much worse drops that we've seen over these past few years. So, if we do continue to see more panic and especially more negative China news, I think the market can bleed a lot quicker than most people expect it to, as we can tell just from, Friday's pullback.
Yeah, Friday's pullback, and then of course we can go to like a daily chart and go back and look at the drop from the beginning of this year, like pretty much from the beginning of February or middle of February all the way down to those April lows. SPY was selling off in a pretty nasty way, and it all actually played out pretty quickly there within just a couple month time frame. So yeah, it can definitely move a lot faster than what a lot of traders think. And, looking at the market right now, it's still relatively close to highs. Now, that last pullback ended up resulting in about a 20 to 21% drop with the SPY. Now, I'm not saying it's going to do that again, but could you guys imagine if the SPY ended up dropping another 20% like that and we traded all the way down to around like $540 a share or so? That would be pretty insane.
It would be, and October's the month to do it if it does happen. We can see, historically speaking, almost all of the worst things in the stock market has happened during this time. The most recent example is the, 17% pullback from the great financial crisis of 2008, but we also had Black Monday in 1987 with a 22% pullback. Of course, the crash of 1929, World War I, and banking panic of 1907 as well. I think it would be nice if we could get out of this month and for the market to kind of cool down with these China tensions. But if we do continue to see fearful panic selling, that is something that we have to adapt to as traders. And honestly, it makes for a lot of great trading opportunity as well, whether it's playing puts, UVXY to the upside, or just sitting on cash and buying the dip once all of the panic subsides. But Tom, another thing that's going on is the government shutdown, and every day that passes, it looks like it's just getting worse and worse.
Yeah, we're still stuck in the government shutdown. We have everything going on with China, and on top of that, we have the government shutdown. I mean, what's next, right? I'm just waiting because it seems like everything is starting to pile up right now, and we're getting that big snowball effect, I would say, where fear is starting to creep in. But looking at the government shutdown and with the stats here, with it lasting almost 40 days, that is a huge number, right? The last and largest government shutdown was 35 days. So, if this one does last 40 days, I think that would have some cause for concern. But Mike, I know that, as everything's been boiling over recently, gold has been a market that has been fantastic. And look at it again today. GLD was up 2.3%. Even if we go to silver, it was moving in a great way too, up 1.74%. But I really want to focus in on gold here because I actually saw some of the most interesting statistics I think I might have seen all year long, and they're coming with none other than gold. So if gold is up 9 weeks in a row, guys, it looks like for 1 day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, and especially 1 week to 2 months later, my gosh, there's only one green reading mixed into any situation that this has ever happened.
My lord. So yeah, gold has never gone up 10 weeks in a row before. Of course, this historic gold rally has multiple things playing into it. Of course, central banks around the world are buying up gold. The dollar's been getting devalued, and the government shutdown is causing investors to flock towards safety. So, there's a lot of good reasons for gold to, have a big up move, but at the same time, there comes a point at which this trend is just unsustainable, and we might be there, at least in a historical sense. So if we do start to see a pullback, there might be some good bearish opportunities.
Yeah, there can be. And I know I've been getting a lot of questions lately. A lot of people are wondering when this gold slowdown will start to happen or when there will be that inevitable pullback. And of course, with gold never going up 10 weeks in a row in history, that's a pretty big statement, right? And I would even say that there's been periods in the past where, you could say that it would justify larger moves out of gold, like different wars and things like that. But nonetheless, gold is having a historic run right now. And hey, who knows? Maybe we will get to 10 weeks. But I gotta say though, I think that we're a little closer to the high than not here, at least in the ultra short term. But Mike, we're pretty much done with events for this week. It looks like as far as the PPI data from today, retail sales went, they are delayed. Same things with the building permits and housing starts tomorrow. So we're all clear there. Taiwan Semiconductor actually reported a really nice earnings report this morning, but then they ended up turning over and going red. For tomorrow, we do have Ally, SLB, State Street, a couple of those regional banks tomorrow too. So I don't know, buckle up.
All right, well, let's get right into the fun stuff then, which are some setups and predictions. A stock that is definitely on my radar is RGTI, and it is to the downside. This stock has been one of the craziest quantum stocks over the past year. Basically, from the beginning of the year, it went from about like $18 a share all the way up to highs of like close to $60 per share, but even that is a little bit skewed because if you look at the stock like from November of 2024 to where it was just recently, it went from like $1.50 all the way up to close to 60. So it has had a crazy run. There's been a lot of euphoria with this, and we are starting to see people just panic sell out of it. It fell by 15% today, and I think that investors are kind of like waking up to reality in the sense that, there are some real risks in the market right now, and maybe it's not a great idea to be, in a stock that is as aggressively valued as Rigetti is and as speculative as it is. I like the risk reward playing this to the downside. It doesn't mean it has to fall tomorrow, but like over like the next couple of trading days and even into like the next like trading week, this will be on my bearish radar.
Yeah, I don't blame you. There is a lot of stocks starting to turn over. A lot of the quantum stocks, of course, and Rigetti has been one of the leaders. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking at it down as well, especially since it was down 14% today and with just how volatile that move ended up becoming. But with my first setup, I'm actually looking at Affirm. Affirm ended up falling down 5.4% today. And if we go to the daily chart, I really like the way that Affirm has been continuing on the downtrend. And over the past day or so, on the daily, it started to break under a really crucial support range around that $70 area. So I like that pullback through support, and I will be watching for ultimately the next major support that I'm watching for to come into play around $63 to $64. That would result in around a $4 to $5 drop from where Affirm is right now, but that's what I'm targeting up. Of course, like I said, that support breaking in the short term was one of my favorite things to see, so keep your eyes on it. It's selling off, and again, it's one of those growth stocks that had a great run this year, but it is starting to turn over a little bit more now.
No doubt. Another stock that's close on watch is KBE. This is an ETF that follows the banking industry, and we recently saw a $725,000 big money put play on this one for the 55 strike puts for January 16th of 2026. We're really starting to see this ETF bleed. The big money trader is still holding this, and I think it's a play to definitely keep in mind. There's still a good amount of time left to this expiration. There's real news driving this area of the market lower, and the price action is pretty solid, so it's definitely on my bearish radar.
With all the news with the regional banks and just banks in general right now having a lot of negative price action and a lot of negative, I would say, sentiment, this is a pretty advantageous play. I will be watching it as well. That was quite the move today. But with my next setup, I'm looking at Palantir to the downside. Yes, another overextended stock in the short term. And something that's awesome with Palantir is if we actually look on the daily chart, it's actually double topping. Yes, back in August, they topped out around that 188 to 190 point. Again, just recently, they topped out right there again. So I'm watching for a bigger pullback to come into play as these tech stocks and just as the overall market cools off a little bit. Now, in the short term, I did notice that there are a lot of sellers overhead with Palantir. And if we look, The low of day from yesterday is right around 176. Now, if we go to the Bookmap, there is not really any buyers stacked up underneath, at least nothing significant like we can see overhead, like 184, 185, 186. There is a lot of sellers stacked up there with over 200,000 shares stacked up at 185. So ultimately for tomorrow, I'm looking for a pullback below that 176 mark, that low from yesterday, and I'll be watching for a push to the next big buy wall of 170. Palantir can be pretty volatile, and it's been holding up for a long time. So I'm definitely watching for it to have more of a pullback. And, you know, Mike, I know it's been a lot of people's favorite stocks in the short term, but you just have to be willing to adapt, especially when market conditions get a bit haywire like this.
Definitely. All right, well, let's keep a close eye on Palantir. It's definitely a strong mover. And besides that, let's jump right into today's momentum plays. With the first one, we have Micron, ticker symbol MU, to the upside.
MU did great today, closing up 5.52%. If they can break their high of day right around 206.40, then watch it to the upside.
With the next one, we have D-Wave Quantum, ticker symbol QBTS, to the downside.
Another quantum stock that had a terrible day, and they're actually straddling the $40 support. But if they break under $39.65 just at the low of day, then watch it down.
And with the last one, we have Archer Aviation, ticker symbol ACHR, to the downside.
This one actually started off really good today at open, but ended up closing down 8.9%. If it pulls down under $11.80, then watch for a downside continuation.
Sounds good. So we have these three stocks on the radar for potential continuations tomorrow, only if they break through at the levels listed. These stocks are volatile, so you have to protect yourself. Whether you trade one of these three stocks or anything else, prioritize making smart, long-term oriented trading decisions. If you need help with that, check out the Key Lessons channel of the StockedUp Discord to learn for free. And besides that, Tom, it is now about that time for today's $720,000 big money trade, and we are looking at ticker symbol FLG. Today, the trader here bought the 9 strike put options that expire on May 15th of 2026. FLG is Flagstar Financial. It's a regional financial services company. Regional bank stocks got hit really hard today, and there's just a lot of fear in this area of the market. Looking at FLG, it is currently trading a little bit above $11 per share, so that makes these 9 strike put options a little bit far out of the money, which makes this a high risk, high reward setup. But also these options have a good amount of time to them, and implied volatility is rising, which helps long dated puts like this one. I think it's a very interesting situation. I like that in a broader sense. FLG has also been downtrending for many years at this point, which goes to show it's kind of like a weak spot in this area. I think it's interesting, but it is high risk, high reward.
It really is, and I think that the technical traders out there are going to really like this setup as well, because FLG started to pull under a nice trend of higher lows today. Now again, it wasn't an intraday setup like the SPY, it's more of a daily trend of those higher lows, but we can see that FLG has been following a pretty nice trend recently. It actually tried to hold it a couple days ago, but with the bad news today, it just could not hold above there any longer. So it ended up giving out, and I think it's a pretty advantageous play, especially with all the news going on with all these regional banks, of course. And obviously even big banks like JP Morgan and others have had some pretty rough news as well. So I'm going to keep watching FLG to the downside. I would say I would be pretty worried if FLG started to rip back above like $12.50. That is like almost $1.50 away from where we currently are, but it would definitely show that the downtrend might start shifting back up.
Definitely. And if you guys are new to the channel, welcome, and consider obliterating that subscribe button. Every single day we do multiple hours of research to cover everything you need to know in the market, whether it be big money trades like this one, breaking news related to bank stocks like today, or China updates, or earnings and events, SPY levels and analysis, and basically everything you need to know every single day. If you subscribe, you'll get our videos recommended to you more often, so consider doing that if you want. And let's also give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Diego, in the StockedUp Discord, who had some beautiful gains with some SPY put options today. Huge shout out to you, Diego. Keep up the great work going forward. It is awesome to see posts like this one. If you guys are into short-term trading, definitely check out that first link in the description in the comments down below to get in on the Stocked Up trading floor. This will give you full access to our army of custom trading bots, daily access to the big money plays before we talk about them in these nightly videos, our weekly live events. You can chat with Tom and myself all day long and access more tools and resources than you could possibly need for short-term trading. It's the place to be, and you can save quite a bit with coupon code BIGMONEY. So definitely check it out, but we're definitely set for an exciting day in the market tomorrow. Keep a close eye on the news, especially related to anything with China. That moved the market a ton last Friday, and it is one of the key focal points in the market right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market tomorrow.